For the past 3 weeks I have been agonizing over how best to incorporate into this series of tefillah the Siddur that is presently in use in the Reformed Temple synagogues of the 21st century. Were it not for the fact that the Reform movement of today cannot divorce itself from the underpinnings of Geiger and the classical German Reform movement of the mid-1800s, this Siddur could easily sit upon the shelf of a modern Orthodox synagogue. There's a lot that can be said in favor of the Reform Siddur. I like, for example, the highlighting of these 18 introductory brachot as Nisim B'chol Yom, an acknowledgement, I assume, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for daily miracles. Although I should point out the recasting of the tefillot does not very often align itself with the actual text. For example, the first of the 18 brachot, the bracha of Asher Natan L'Sechvi Bina L'Havchin Ben Yom U'Ben Laila, which is described as the daily miracle of awakening, and is a couple of steps once removed from the Sechvi and the Bina discussed in the previous panel, and the point of this bracha, which is to distinguish between day and night. Similarly, with the bracha under discussion, the bracha of Pokeach Ivrim is labeled as a daily miracle relating to sight, which needs to be teased out as to what actually is meant with this label. As we shall see, this is a problem not just for the Mishkan Tefillah Siddur, but also for the translations offered in the Frum Orthodox Siddurim. But first, the actual wording of this bracha, Pokeach Ivrim. This bracha is drawn from a pasuk in Tehillim 146:8, a parak that is part of the Halalukas that have been included in the tefillah as part of the Psukei de Zimra. 146:8 states that Hashem is Pokeach Ivrim, Hashem is Zokef Kefufim, Hashem is Ohev Tzadikim. Insofar as the translations are concerned, the Chabad Siddur, following closely to the literal translation of the text, translates the Pokeach Ivrim as who opens the eyes of the blind. The Koren Siddur does some rephrasing and translates Pokeach Ivrim as who gives sight to the blind. Both translations are somewhat problematic on a number of counts. Are we saying that God miraculously has the blind people waking up one morning being able to see? Or are we acknowledging the advances in science that through various procedures the blind can nowadays see? The reality, of course, is that neither of these two options translate into the real world. Firstly, but in general, a blind person remains blind, and secondly, miracles are generally a rare occurrence. In the words of Chazal, Ein Somchin al Hanes. The theological problem with this bracha of Pokeach Ivrim is that if the 18 brachot reference HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a caring God, fixing up a broken world such as those born into blindness, then how does one relate to this bracha of God being a Pokeach Ivrim? And simply suggesting that this is a bracha over sight is something that needs to be teased out, and when we do tease out the options, each of the options is problematic. The first option, where we translate the Pokeach Ivrim bracha as God who heals the blind, as noted previously, then why are there still tens of thousands of people who are still blind? Or rephrasing the issue, why would a caring God cause people to be born blind? And if they are born blind and God has the ability to heal the blind, either through a paranormal miracle in the spirit of the evangelical Christian movement, or through the miracles of science. Either way, most people who are born blind or become blind remain so throughout their life. This is the position that the secularists of today attribute to Epicurean, a philosopher who lived during the period of the Tanaim. Another option is that the Pokeach Ivrim bracha is an acknowledgement to Kadosh Baruch who has given mankind the ability to see. Two problems with this approach. Firstly, the gift of sight is not limited to mankind. Animals can see, fish can see. And secondly, one may ask, why do I need to make this bracha every single morning, day in and day out? This is a problem that is shared with the third option for Pokeach Ivrim, in which we apply all of the 18 brachot not to the macro level of God giving sight to mankind, but on the micro level. I acknowledge HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving me sight. And here the question becomes somewhat more pronounced, especially if we look at the actual text of the bracha, Pokeach Ivrim, Pokeach in the present tense. In other words, today, this morning, God has given me sight, which begs the question, unless there was a reason for me to have lost my sight during the night, and for which upon awakening my sight has returned to me, which as a general rule is not the case, then why am I making this bracha that today God has given me the ability to see? In the next panel, I shall be looking at a concept that, when applied to each of the 18 brachot, will explain why these brachot are said each and every single day throughout one's lifetime.